principal can't talk, like, you can't talk to all the teachers.
Yeah.
They need and the teachers all the teachers can't be running to the principal. So yeah, they are important. And as the principal role becomes more complex because of, bureaucratic regulation or whatever you want to say, policy, the demands from society on principals, all that kind of stuff, they push or they delegate. They would say delegate, but it or distribute, however you want to say it. The role of school improvement and leading learning gets pushed down to the middle leader.
Yeah.
So they really become the driver of change in a school.
Welcome to today's episode of SELINTalks, featuring the insightful Liz Benson, a seasoned educational leader renowned for her expertise in middle leadership development. Liz joins us to explore the crucial layers of leadership challenges and the transformative approaches needed to support and develop middle leaders in today's complex educational landscape. In this episode, Liz shares her journey, shedding light on the nuances of empowering educators, enhancing staff development, and expanding the professional network for sustainable growth. We'll delve into how strategic partnerships can enhance educational leadership and the vital role of passion in driving change. If you're an educational leader looking to deepen your impact, or an aspiring leader eager to understand the dynamics of effective school leadership, Liz's experience and strategies are invaluable. Join us as we unpack the tools and insights necessary for nurturing leadership at every level in educational sector. Let's get inspired and equipped to take on the challenges and opportunities of educational leaderships together. Thank you so much for being here on SELINTalks. How are you feeling today?
I am good, thank you. It's actually a public holiday here, so I've had a lovely day relaxing and ready to talk middle leadership.
Awesome. So before we begin with your journey and other deeper questions, I want to start with an icebreaker, is what I call it. So
yeah.
I have been fascinated by the range of roles you have embraced in education. I was reading through your profile, I was going through some of your work. If you could have 1 hour workshop with any historical leader, who would it be and what would you focus on?
Okay. Maybe they're not considered historical because they're still a leader. But I would really, really like to have a workshop with Julia Gillard, who was the Prime Minister of Australia for quite a while. Probably about 10, 15 years ago. And so she made a famous speech that's been viewed many times around the world around misogyny and, the language menus and how they talk about women. And now she has a podcast called A Podcast of One's Own that's out of King's College. And it's all about women in leadership and enabling women to lead in all sorts of different areas. But I was thinking, when I listen to her podcast, I also think about different people in my life that have either mentored me, women that have mentored me, or women that maybe I'm mentoring, or women that I've worked with. So I wouldn't just want her. I think I'd want some of those other women with me as well.
I think I will be looking forward for that kind of a workshop because that's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, like Julia speaks to so many amazing women, and we get, I'm in education, so I hear a lot about and work with a lot of women in education. So it's always lovely to hear from women outside education, and I think that would be an amazing conversation to be part of.
Very true. Now transitioning to your own leadership journey, what sparked your passion to, for focusing specifically on middle leadership? What is middle leadership in schools, and how did you start on this path? What made you do this?
It started quite a while ago, but I guess the thing that's kept me going is that I've spent quite a lot of my career in middle leadership. And for a long time, I considered myself a career middle leader. And that doesn't mean, I honestly have ambitions to be in senior, and I am in senior leadership now. But the path of middle leadership in many different contexts can be challenging because you're navigating that space in between. And over the years, I've had some incredible opportunities to share not only the story of my middle leadership, but the work at the school that I'm working in. And then I've had opportunities, I've been in contexts where I haven't had those opportunities. And so For a long time there, I didn't have a place with other middle leaders who I guess I could connect with. So that led me to thinking about amplifying the voice of the middle leader in schools. How come they're not part of the leadership conversation in schools? How do we develop middle leaders? So, how things, you think of one thing and it leads to a conversation with someone else. That led to me being involved in ACEL, and then, which is the Australian Council for Educational Leaders, and gaining a position on their board, and in Queensland. And then I also, from that, thought, okay, how can I set up a network for middle leaders in Queensland? And we started that, and that's been going for 6 years now. And
Wow.
that network meets twice a term, one on the Gold Coast and one in Brisbane, and is run for and by middle leaders. And that network has then led me to write for middle leaders, write about middle leadership. It's through that network that I met Patrick Dignan, who mentored me to edit a book with Barb Watterson, who's also involved in ACEL, and led me to meet Pete Grutenbauer, who's my PhD supervisor. So it's all about opportunities, and then talking to people about middle leadership, their thoughts and feelings about it, and then helping me expand my ideas on middle leadership. So I guess that in a nutshell is my journey, and I just continue to be excited about what they do, the sophistication of their leadership skills, and I guess continuing to share their story about middle leadership and the challenges.
Right. Like you mentioned, leading from a middle can often feel like navigating complex water. We just talked about that. What do you see as the biggest challenge middle leaders face today, and how do you address it in this? Like, how do you address this in your work?
Yeah. So when I was thinking about the answer to this question, I think there's two ways I'm going to answer it. The first one is what I think middle leaders see as their challenges, and that comes out of talking to academics that are researching middle leadership, coaching middle leaders, because I do quite a bit of that, and at the moment I lead a team of middle leaders in the school I'm working in, and then there's also what I think is the biggest challenge. So there's two kind of answers. So middle leaders will tell you things like that are around the human side of leadership. It's not necessarily their challenges around curriculum leadership or pedagogical leadership, because middle leaders in schools are appointed to the middle leadership role because they have expertise in that area. It's more about how do they lead the people, how do they juggle the space between teaching and leading, and also influencing up and down. How do they have accountability conversations? That's a huge, they often ask, how do you have a difficult conversation? Time management and juggling strategic and operational thinking would be something they would identify as a challenge. So that's what I think some of the things I think middle leaders find challenging. But for me, I think the biggest challenge education has is the development of middle leaders. And I think that comes from a lens of leadership development in education that is very much seen through the development of senior leadership. So many people who develop middle leaders, whether it's as part of a system, so they're in a system role and they're doing that, whether they're a school principal or whether they're a coach or someone who's running workshops, they're often looking at it through the lens of principalship and aspiration to principalship. And in
Okay.
Australia in particular, the majority of middle leaders, 3/4 of them don't aspire to be principals. They really want to stay in that space of teaching and leading. They don't want to step away from the children because they like that space and that's where they get the joy, but they also want to have an influence on decision making and the context. And so we need to start seeing the development of middle leaders in their context and for their the job they're doing now. There's also an idea that middle leadership is a place of moving as a stepping stone to principalship or senior leadership. And as I said, for some people, it's not. And so thinking about how do we develop the leaders that have been in middle leadership for a long time and keep their energy, them growing, their renewal of their leadership skills. So for me, who's been in middle leadership for 20 years, I need something very different from the person that's aspiring to be a middle leader. So for me, that's the greatest challenge for education in middle leadership.
Right. And how do you address this in your work?
Well, so look, I talk about it. I raise that as that's part of my conversation. So, my work is with middle leaders, but it's also for middle leaders. And the work for middle leaders is like talking to you, writing, editing books, doing the research that I'm doing through my PhD. That's all about the work for middle leaders. And that's about raising, for me, that's about showing and highlighting the sophistication of middle leadership. Talking about the variety of middle leaders that we have and their needs. And I think I've come to believe that there's 5 conversations that we could facilitate that would help middle leader development, and that every middle leader should have access to these 5 conversations. And those conversations are having a coaching conversation, an accountability conversation, a conversation about leadership, like theory, practice, that kind of stuff. A collaborative, beg pardon?
Right. I'm just agreeing. Yeah.
A collaborative conversation with their peers. So I've worked in schools where the best PD I've had in school has been working on a project with my peers and collaborating on something, and a network conversation where you're engaging with middle leaders outside your context, because school middle leadership is very siloed and can be quite lonely at times. Yeah, so that's practically, if I was to change the way we develop middle leaders and I could wave a wand and do this across, a wide context, I would build that into the life of the middle leader, those 5 conversations.
Right. I understand from whatever you have mentioned that there's a lot of, push that is required to keep working on all of this that you've been doing. What actually keeps you going?
What keeps me going is helping people. I'm a teacher because I love helping people. I really love working with kids, whether it's directly in the classroom or at the moment as head of secondary at the school I work at. And I love working with middle leaders. And I love helping people achieve what they want to achieve in whatever way that is possible. So, working with, last year I ran, and I'm going to run again in the second half of this year, a webinar program for female middle leaders around a book called Step In, Step Up. I get messages from those women. They've now taken the step to apply for a particular job or taken on a challenge of presenting a webinar of their own. I think that's what keeps most of us going, is seeing how we're influencing and helping others. Yeah.
That is so true. Considering the unique position middle leaders are in, what specific development needs do they have, and how do you tailor your programs to meet these needs?
Yeah. So I think their development needs are not different and are similar to any leader's needs, because I see leadership is this continuum of development, and it doesn't matter whether you're managing a team of 5 in a very large organization or if you're the CEO. The context is different, but you still need human skills, you still need technical skills, you still need strategic skills, you still need communicate, you need all those skills. So it depends on I think it depends on your experience and your context and your goals for your career as to what your development needs are. So for a teacher who's aspiring to be a head of department, they probably need more around, what is leadership? What are the different, how can I develop a leadership identity? How can I write a resume to highlight what I do? That kind of leadership stuff. Someone like myself, who has been a head of department for quite a few years, and wants to aspire to be a principal maybe, then I might need something where I can influence beyond my context, so that or be mentored by a principal. So I think it really depends on the middle leader's stage of career leadership development, their context they're working in, and their and their goals for themselves, that influences. So that's why I do a variety of things, and why I've probably, I don't chop and change. I think I kind of think about what's needed what I'm interested in at the moment, what people are interested in. So the Step In, Step Up webinar series, that's really for women in middle leadership.
Right.
The coaching, I do a little bit of that on the weekends now, and that's, that's for individuals that have very specific needs, usually around career. I do I do a lot of career coaching for middle leaders. The Pivotal People Network on the Gold Coast is for people who want to get out of their silo and meet others in middle leadership in other sectors of education. So it brings together people from the independent sector, the private sector, the Catholic sector, the government sector, and it also is something they can access quite easily. The book is about helping middle leaders share their story, develop their writing skills, expand their horizons as much as it's for the reader. So, there's lots that I do that is for very, very different reasons.
Right. So we are going to put your LinkedIn profile in this, the podcast description. Is there any way, other way that you would want to connect with people, maybe for career coaching that you just have mentioned?
Yeah. So connecting with you talking about connecting with me.
Right.
Yeah. So my LinkedIn profile is my main port of communication, and I have a newsletter which has been on a bit of the quiet side while I've moved from Australia to Malaysia, but I'm starting to ramp that up again, and that has that'll come out every fortnight. So there's that people can read. Also through the Australian Council of Educational Leaders, I'm on their coaching their coaching program, so you can connect with me there as well. But LinkedIn is the main place to message and contact me.
Okay, so your publications and workshops play a crucial role in shaping the discourse around middle leadership. You have mentioned a lot of work that you've been doing, different webinars, books, everything. Can you share a success story where your insights significantly impacted a leader's approach or a school's culture? Maybe with an example, a real life example.
Yeah, so the strategic planning chapter in the book, Middle Leadership in Schools, Ideas and Strategies for Navigating the Muddy Waters of Middle Leadership, that's come about from years of me practicing strategic tools, using strategic tools, developing in them and running workshops. So I used to run workshops for this Department of Education around strategic leadership. And then I've shared that with teams that I've worked with. So my current team of middle leaders that I work with at Shri and I International School here in KL, we are strategically planning. So using those tools that are in that chapter helps clarify their just strategic thinking. And I've had some feedback from people who have read that chapter about how it's made them think differently about planning what they want to do in their faculty and thinking beyond just their faculty, thinking about what's coming from the top down. So what's the system policy? What's the school vision? What's the school strategic plan? All the way down to connecting it to the individual teacher, professional development plan, and the student learning goals. So it's so in that chapter I talk about this like broad, like it's a flow chart, and some people have told me that they found that quite useful and they're now using that in their faculty.
That's amazing. Your book, the book that you're talking about, where can people get it?
Yeah, so the book, as I said, the title is Middle Leadership in Schools, and it's edited by myself, Professor Patrick Dignan, who is a fairly well-known academic in educational leadership, and Barbara Waterston, who is the CEO of the Australian Council of Educational Leaders. We gathered people together to write this, and we paired up middle leaders with a mentor, and they wrote together. And you can get that through the Australian Council of Educational Leaders. You can get it on Amazon, and you can also get it through Emerald Publishing, who are the publishers.
Awesome. All right. Diving into your PhD research, what emerging trends or surprising findings can you share about the development of middle leaders?
Yeah, so I can't really talk about trends because I haven't collected any data yet because I'm about to do that. So I'm at part-time means it's a very slow process. But
I understand.
What has come what has come out of the literature review, which in this year I will submit an article for publication around that literature review, is this idea that the majority of middle leadership development is left to the school, and it's really left to the principal. And that means that middle leadership is left to chance. Depends on development is left to chance. Sorry, middle leadership development. It depends on who is the principal, their interest in the development of their middle leaders, and their skill and knowledge around leadership development. So the majority of middle leadership development that's come out of the very small amount of research that exists in this area is that it's mainly informal development. It's being mentored by people, it's working alongside people, with people, it's talking, having conversations with their principal. It's very, very ad hoc, left to chance, and informal. So that probably wasn't surprising to me, but it's good to have that sort of identified, because then we can say, there's a need for this.
Like, in a very brief manner, if you could just tell me, for our audience, how this entire journey has been for you. Like the entire, even from when, you have been the department of head of department and the other things, and then developing courses, and then all of these things that you have done, how has it been?
I'm going to sum it up with empowering is probably the word. So right from, I guess, the very first time I said to someone who was coaching me, Ian Wallace, he was in Melbourne, Victoria, and I said to him, how can I share this story of what we're doing? Because we were in a school that was, it was a complex context, and we were doing some really good things, and it was improving student outcomes. Right from that moment, and having people like him say, well, we can run a workshop on this. You design it, you facilitate it. To then, going, moving to Queensland and meeting Deb Kemba and at ACEL and saying to Deb, I want to set up a network for middle leaders, and her saying, well, let's do it. And, helping me do that, to then Patrick, Dignan and Barb saying, well, let's write a book. And we'll put it together. So for me, it's all about the people that have helped me, and that has been incredibly empowering, because when Pete Grutenberg said to me, you should do your PhD. It's a scary thing to contemplate, but then you've got these people that are backing you and guiding you along the way. I think that's, if I'm going to say how is it for me, it's been a big journey of empowerment for me. I think, yeah.
That's amazing. I think there's always going to be a group of people that are going to be your pack, and they're going to it's a need actually for a human being to thrive, that it's not just a human being, it's an entire team, entire pack behind, and it's always give and take. You're going to support the other person, the other person is going to support. Like you said, it's quite lonely, and you said it's lonely, right, in the middle leadership.
Yeah, it's very lonely, and it's very hectic. Middle leadership, like schools are fast-paced places, and
True.
and that there's a lot going on, and so for middle leaders to step out of their school or out of their faculty can be quite challenging. So it can be very lonely, and they're often siloed into a subject area or a discipline, so that their thinking's around one sort of context or one curriculum. It can be quite lonely. So if you don't have principals, like I've had some great principals, Karen Money, who was my principal at William Ruthven Secondary College, absolutely amazing. She provided the coach that started this place for me. So it's having principals that are willing to put some time and effort, whether it's their time and effort or their resources, into you, I think is, important, and like incredibly important.
Right. That's a very big takeaway, actually.
Yeah. I mean, we all, like you said, we all need that, whether we're in middle leadership or not. We all need that.
Yeah, we all need that. There needs to be a support system, like we say, a safe space, maybe. Anything that works for a person. There are a certain group of people, even not even a group, even 2-3 people, that's it. And we all need that, right? All right.
Yeah.
So
we all need that. Yeah.
Lastly, but not the least, how do you envision the evolution of leadership development for middle leaders? And what innovations do you think will be crucial in the coming years?
in the Australian context and slowly around the world, but a lot in Britain, a little bit in Asia, middle leadership is being researched, and what middle leaders do, how they do it, is starting to be looked at more closely. And once academics look at things, and then the worldwide teacher shortage that there is also a educational leadership shortage or crisis, whatever words you want to use. So that the focus, the unattractiveness of the principal position in many contexts across the world means that the pressure on middle leaders to move up into principalship is greater, and the pressure on systems and schools to develop their middle leaders so they're ready for senior leadership is greater. So I think all that is a huge driver of this conversation around middle leadership and the way we develop them. What worries me is the lack of middle leader voice in that. So education is still very much a big brother, dad, paternalistic kind of a way of thinking that, the senior knows better and they know what the middle needs. I don't agree with that. I think the conversation should be everyone, middle leaders should have a say in what they need and how they're developed. So the middle leader voice is crucial in that conversation around their development and the future of their development. I think I would love to see the innovation being more middle leader agency in creating those development opportunities. I've just got a message from a guy, an educator in Melbourne who runs a middle leader network. It's quite successful, and now he's expanding that to Brisbane, Sydney, and I think somewhere else. It takes people like him, like the Pivotal People team, who are middle leaders. They're leading in the middle to go, okay, I'm going to expend some of my precious energy and use some of my very valuable time to create opportunities for other people. But I would really like their voice to be heard in the more formal offerings that systems and consultants and offer. So I think that's what the innovation that I would really like to see. It's around middle leader agency and voice in this whole development context.
That is really important.
Yeah, I think it's a key, and that's why I like this idea of my thinking around the 5 conversations middle leaders need. If we look at that, middle leadership is best, or it's being done, and middle leaders like it in context. Well, how can you do something that's cost effective? Because middle leadership is the biggest body of leadership in education. Like, you've got one principal in a school, but you can have anywhere from 2, 3 to 16, 20 middle leaders. Depending on the size of the school. So it's costly to develop middle leaders. So you want to create things that you can be done in context, low cost, at scale, that, don't take middle leaders out of their context, because they also don't want to miss class. So for a middle leader to go out for 2 days to a workshop, they have to cover their classes. They then have to, prepare the teachers for that. And then when they come back, they've got to catch up on all that. So I think it's been sensitive to the context of the middle leader as well in the development opportunities that are created.
This has been a very eye-opener. Like, we usually talk about school leaders, we talk about principals and the owners and the directors, then we talk about teachers, doing different things. Then comes the biggest part or biggest chunk of an educational institution is middle leadership. And this has been like, we know that there is that obviously there is, but we don't kind of acknowledge it, because it doesn't work if they're not there, right?
Because the principal can't talk, you can't talk to all the teachers. They need and the teachers all the teachers can't be running to the principal. So they are important. And as the principal role becomes more complex because of bureaucratic regulation, or whatever you want to say, policy, the demands from society on principals, all that kind of stuff, they push or they delegate. They would say delegate, but it or distribute, however you want to say it. The role of school improvement and leading learning gets pushed down to the middle leader. So they really become the driver of change in a school, yet they're employed because they're technically curriculum experts. So there's a huge, there's a big learning curve for a middle leader And so being sensitive to their context and understanding, like hearing their voice in designing their development opportunities is really important to understand those challenges that they have.
Right. I think the fact that you mentioned that they should have the say in the decision making is very important, and that is also going to be one of the key takeaways for anybody who's going to be listening to this podcast, who is listening to this podcast. I think that is very important. The voice needs to be heard, and I'm glad that the work that you're doing is actually making it work.
Oh, thank you. I enjoy it. Yes, I do. And I love talking to people like yourself, because this is the voice of, I'm not the voice of all middle leaders, but there is more and more people talking about it, but there are few people talking about the role of middle leaders and the challenges they face.
Right. It's as important to have the conversation, right? It's to initiate the conversation, have conversations like these to kind of reach out to people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your crucial time and a time from your public holiday. Loved having this conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a nice day. That's a wrap on today's engaging conversation with Liz Benson on SELINTalks. We dove into the essential themes of middle leadership, the importance of empowerment in education, and innovative strategies for school transformation. Liz's insights surely provided a fresh perspective on nurturing and supporting education leaders. Thanks to Liz for sharing her vast knowledge, and all of you for tuning in. We hope you leave this episode inspired and equipped with practical ideas to enhance your leadership journey or support those in leadership roles around you. Stay tuned for more episodes that brings together thought leaders from around the globe to discuss the pressing issues and exciting opportunities in education today. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep connecting.